Well, I mean, I'm a pessimist, I must say, on the economic crisis. I think we're in the early stages of a very significant economic crisis. And I think that's going to be driven by debt, pretty much like the GFC was driven by debt. And I don't think that the policy authorities of the world have got much capacity to respond. I mean, they've flooded the world with liquidity for the last 10 years. It hasn't done half the things they thought it would do in terms of stimulating growth and employment, increases in wages or whatever. And if there were to be a serious correction in the bond market, which would then drive a correction in the stock market, I think you'd see a very, very significant reassessment of asset values globally. And in that context, the example you've picked would be swept away in the sense that, you know, a lot of those properties will fall in value because they are more marginal properties than the main, you know, the family home is the basis of the property sector. But
so should there be a plan in place? John, you're an economist.
Yeah, no,
you're predicting the worst. Should there be a plan in place to protect regional Australia, which will suffer worse than the cities even if there is a downturn?
I don't think there's any plan in place to deal with this as a medium-term challenge in this country or, in fact, globally. We don't have much medium to long-term thinking in this country. And, you know, we sit back and hope that we'll muddle through, in a sense, that the Reserve Bank will handle it or, you know, somehow the government will scrounge up enough to pay the bills. The bottom line is if there were to be a very significant correction, then all the relativities we're taking for granted behind that don't apply. And so, I mean, I would like to think that the political debate might actually move to the position of honesty. Give us an honest assessment of the risks and challenges that are being placed, that we're facing today globally, in economic terms and geopolitical terms, and let's draw that back to be a medium-term strategy. And elements like have been raised in the question will be an element of that. But, I mean, the overarching impact is going to be enormous. And I don't think people are focusing on the risks that we are running in economic mismanagement today. I mean, we keep kicking problems down the road, whether it's budget repair or climate or a whole host of others, funding of NDIS, funding of defence. Take a 10, 15, 20-year view. Education, health, defence, NDIS, infrastructure are all largely unfunded. And yet we have both sides of politics talking about tax cuts. You know,
well, the NDIS is going to be funded by a tax rise, effectively an income tax rise.
I suspect even if that were to get through the Parliament, that will not cover the rapidly expanding costs of the NDIS. In the last budget, they predicted a 600% increase in the cost of the NDIS in this 4-year budget period. I think that's an underestimate.
I'm just going to quickly go back to our questioner. Angie, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
He mentioned the big business tax cuts. If they were to go ahead, could there be something in place? Like, can the government possibly look at putting something in place for the money, like the money saved from those big business tax cuts, putting that into economic development in regional areas?
But it's the opposite. The tax cuts actually take money out of the Treasury. That's $65 billion that the government doesn't have to spend on creating jobs in regional Australia. The government won't be spending on hospitals, won't be spending on schools. You know, we're told to believe this mantra of free market economics. Well, free market economics abandons your town. It tells you that the market will sort itself out, and if all the homes suddenly become worthless overnight, well, that's just how the market operates, and you'll have to leave your community and go somewhere else. That is the logical consequence of neoliberalism. So this is why these tax cuts...
We already do have to leave our community and go somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's look at long-term economic planning, and John is absolutely right. Like, we've accepted this mantra for so long that the market will deal with it, the market will do this. A regulated economy actually looks after people. Look, taxation revenue is to strengthen our economy.
We've had decades of debate in politics about regional policies, and very few of them have ever been successful. And, you know, what the sort of regional policy you get in these days is a Barnaby Joyce moving the quarantine service to Armidale. You know, and they're not being able to operate and have to work out of McDonald's for a while because they couldn't get internet access.
But this is
That's not regional policy.
But this is part of your point about climate action and how important this is. And this is what is so difficult to understand with the government at the moment. And one of Turnbull's greatest failings as a leader is that the infrastructure of climate action creates jobs. Australia could be a leader with interest rates that are so low.
We've got the Minister for Energy and Environment next week. We'll be discussing that a lot. We're going to stick to